Good.
Welcome to Cross Examine with the Gerbers. I'm Megan Gerber, and this is Mr. Ken Gerber. Ken, who do we have on today?
We are blessed to have NFL legend and world-renowned humanitarian Nick Lowery with us.
This will be a 41-yard attempt.
No one kicks better than Nick. Nick Lowery of the Kansas City Chiefs, the most accurate kicker in the history of the NFL.
How are you, Nick? Great to see you.
Wow.
You know what's so funny is I literally was about to make a post today. I get friend requests where people are like, I'm world renowned. And then I go on their page and I'm like, they have 4 friends. How are they world renowned? You really are.
You're the real deal.
Renowned.
Well, thank you. By the way, cross-examine, ladies and gentlemen, Megan Gerber is the female Perry Mason. And by the end of this broadcast, she will have dissected me psychologically, basically destroyed me psychologically. And I will go home with, if I had a tail, with a tail between my legs, because that's what cross-examinations done by the best do.
Exactly. Thank you for that setup. I appreciate that, Nick.
Can't wait.
Well,
can't wait.
We're also cross-examining our lives in view of the cross. And so with that in mind, Nick, can you give us a little bit of background about your faith and where you are with that?
Yeah. I was very uncomfortable talking about this probably 25 years ago. And I feel emotion coming up right now because it's just been a transformation over time with beautiful people, starting with Dick Johnson at St. Albans School. I was an acolyte at the National Cathedral where John McCain and Ronald Reagan and many famous people were buried, where all the presidents line up and pass notes between each other. And my parents, put me through Episcopalian, communion, all those things. I used to watch the minister at the cathedral after every service on Sunday mornings, make sure he took care of all of that wine, which I always found amusing. But seriously, talking about it was a different thing. And Dick Johnson was my mentor and kicking coach. He'd never kicked before, but he had almost died 2 months before we met for my first coaching session as a junior at St. Albans School in Washington, D.C. And I remember walking from my mother's station wagon after dropping me off. And the first thing he said was, "Did you thank her?" I'm like, "Oh, no." And from that point on, there was just a very powerful connection and message from him. And he said, first thing he said, we got on the edge of the bleachers and we went through a process of helping me learn how to relax, because the kicking position teaches how to focus under pressure or you're not going to be good.
Right.
And he said to me, 2 months ago, I was on my deathbed with hepatitis and I was going to die. And I was getting comfortable with that when this kid appeared I hadn't seen in 55, 60 years. He was about 70 then. And he said, he looked right at me and he said, "Dick, you were there for me in school when no one else would be. And, when people were beating me up and bullying me, and you stood up for me then, and I'm going to stand up for you now. You're not going to die." And from that point on, everything that Dick said to me was in this state of grace, this state that God was in the room. And it was so consistent. I use that word a lot now. Consistency. Who are the people in your life that their essence is there when they're 5 and their essence is there when they're 20, or whenever you meet them, you just know that's them. And sure, we all go through changes and lessons and evolutions, but he was always that way. And he coached me through high school. I kicked the game-winning field goal with literally 2 seconds left in the mud and the rain and wind against our arch rival Landon from 43 yards. It goes through the uprights literally as time expired. The other 5,000 fans ran on the field thinking Landon had won, our rival. And then there was a delay. We realized it did go through, and then suddenly all our fans went through. And that was sort of an interesting moment when Dick was teaching me about preparation, about getting ready for your moments. And he'd convinced our coach, Gary Gardner, another great mentor. But Gary wasn't one that talked about his faith, whereas Dick did. And so that was the first reference. And then I would say a man named Dr. Torrey Brooks, about 20 years ago, we just he was so comfortable talking about it, and he always used that word grace and
Right.
the idea of love. And there's a book I'm reading right now called Tattoos on the Heart, which is all about the grace that this Catholic minister found for the deadliest and the most violent and the most compromised and conflicted gang members in the Dolores mission in LA. It's always coming back to that God's so big that it's actually, to conceive of it, is more like the God we think. So who would be the God we think? That's how big God is. And that bigness is,
it's huge.
Love.
Was there ever a time that you questioned your faith, though? Have you always been this strong in that, Nick?
Oh, no. I mean, I wouldn't say that I felt like God was not on my side or any of those things. We do see a big distinction between organized religion and your relationship with Jesus Christ. That's
absolutely.
And most people I talk to are on the same page. They're like, organized religion has reflected politics, wars, brutality, Torquemada and the Spanish Inquisition being the worst examples. And of course, we see what is happening now with the Muslim Brotherhood using religion to really just, perpetrate horrible things on other human beings. But just to progress, though, I began to date a young lady named Jessie Coulter, who is the wife and widow then of the great Waylon Jennings. If you remember Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson.
Oh, yeah.
And she was that way. And it made me feel even more comfortable, because the thing is, you see people, what they say, then you see what's in here.
Right.
You see their actions consistently. And she's always that way. And she's also had an incredible sense of humor. And I just broken off my engagement, which was devastating, but it also was great about helping me just be more aware of the conflicts of narcissism and self-importance and selfishness, which I saw in the other person, and realized I had to do that work on myself. And so I'm so much more clear now that whenever I see something, the biblical quote is the mote in the other's eye, cast it out in your own eye first. Your own judgmental, critical, righteous eye. And so when we see somebody that's living that, it invades us. It marinates throughout every cell in our body.
Sure.
And so I've just gotten more clear with that. And then I think then we begin to magnetize ourselves to people that have that energy. And so more recently, if you haven't heard of him, I'd love to get him on your podcast. Tim Story and I met during COVID. We were speaking on the Think and Grow Rich tour here in Phoenix at the Hyatt at Gainey Ranch, and which I love, by the way. And there was something about him, and I had to meet him and told him about my work with the homeless. And we connected then. We exchanged phone numbers, but it took about 3 years. Well, for the last 3 years, he and I have been pretty close. He's been on Oprah 38 times. He's both a minister and he has a PhD in therapy. And he actually began his ministry in many ways, went with Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau and Charlton Heston, three of the greats in their later years, which then morphed into more mainstream, younger Bible study in Beverly Hills, right in the heart of one of the most, I wouldn't say anti-God, anti-Christ, but just
it's a little bit of a den.
Uncomfortable. If you ever see most ministers and priests in movies, they ring hollow most of the time. Now, the Passion of the Christ with Mel Gibson, that's not true. It's incredibly deep, but most of those, and that spiritual culture there, I think Tim created an opportunity, a doorway he opened up for people to realize that if you're thinking about your success, you won an Oscar, you've done all these great things, there's still going to be that emptiness inside. Where is the source of your fullness, your purpose?
And I love that. That reminds me of that song, Only Jesus. And I was telling Ken today, you know what I love so much about the podcast? I love learning about everybody's jobs here as they're humans. Your soul having a human experience, but we're getting a glimpse of your eternal soul when you get to share these things with me. And it made me tear up this morning because I feel so honored that I get to see that in you and other people we have on this podcast. It makes me feel like we get to peel back the name and what you created, what you did on this earth, which is fantastic. But what's even greater is what God has done in our lives. And I get to meet you, the soul that's going to heaven, and we get to be there together, and I get to witness and see who you truly are. And I just love that. That brings so much joy to my heart. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you. Well, Tim's story moved from Beverly Hills down to Newport Beach, and he does a ministry, and we call it World Shakers. But you just know when somebody is authentic. Every day he does 2 hours of reflection and reading the scripture, something that I wish I did and need to do more of. But he's just so imbued with that, and it's an easy authenticity. He's got a great voice. But anyway, so he's moved me further forward in that. I write a lot of poetry, and the poetry that I write is almost always about a spiritual balance in life. And so those are the things that, to answer your original question, in a very extended way, that got me more comfortable. And by the way, you bring up heaven. I'm not afraid or uncomfortable with mentioning the things that I'm not comfortable with the Bible. And I'm just going to put it out there that, the descriptions of heaven in the Bible are, with adjectives like gold paved streets and all those things. That's not heaven. Heaven's not manufactured in a material way.
Right. No, that's a man-made value.
The gold of the spirit. It is the depth and a million colors, not just gold of the spirit, the depth of insight into human beings, the ability, because if you don't have that, how do you have the ability, as Jesus did, to be comfortable with the tax collectors and the prostitutes, even more so than the Pharisees who thought they were gold?
Right.
And yet they were all in that, I've got my stuff together and you don't, and see, you're just not as good as I am, as opposed to, it's such a primal psychology, as opposed to, and I'm uncomfortable. People listening, that I'm born a sinner, that I'm born flawed. God made me perfect in his image. And by the way, that perfection is manifested in imperfection.
Of course.
We're on a human plane, a flesh plane. So I had to get that 2 cents in. I wish the Bible described heaven in ways, and of course, heaven also is a big thing in the Muslim religion, and these are really important themes right now. Why are we living here? Where is it to go to heaven? And if heaven's that case, is it we're floating? It just seems so naive to describe it that way, when spiritual depth is the greatest depth. It's the greatest wisdom. It's the greatest empathy. It's the greatest compassion. It's the greatest connection. So that the power of Jesus and God connects us to all our loved ones and role models who have died already, and they're there, and yet somehow we're going to be able to be with them. What kind of power is that? That's when we go back to, I think, what this book talks about, called Tattoos on the Heart, that really God is so big that he's really the God of what we think God is. He's that big. And, all you have to do from a mathematical standpoint is think about the universe, when it's trillions of galaxies that represent trillions of stars. I mean, it's numbers and size that's so beyond anything we can comprehend.
Sure.
So the phrase in the Bible is about, beyond our understanding. Well,
absolutely.
It's so far beyond
behind
our understanding. It's just, so there's the humility that in the end is, you just notice with the real people in life that have God in their hearts. Jesus is speaking to them and they're hearing him. And it's not because they haven't, had conflicts, and it's harder today than ever to not be confronted with temptation and with the hypocrisies of people and our so-called leadership, and the storytelling that's going on through the media, which seems to no longer be about accurate storytelling, but just taking a side. So there's
true.
my 2 cents. I've given you about 15 cents so far.
No, we love it so much.
Is there a particular game that you remember praying your hardest? Is there one game that you remember thinking, I really need I'm not going to pretend that I know football stuff. Like I don't, I'm really naive, but I think about the emotion about stuff. And I think like, people that have their biggest concert or their biggest game, is there a particular game that sticks in your mind that you just think like, I was praying so hard on that particular day?
Well, certainly running out on the field and say, God, just handle this for me. This is now 30 years ago. So, almost 30 years ago. So I almost played 25 years ago for the Rams in the Super Bowl. I was praying for that. That's another story altogether. But, I think of the Jelly Roll song. I love it. Only pray to God when I need a favor.
Right.
And so it really wasn't, I certainly prayed, and we've had chapel before games, on home games and all those things. But to me, it's the consistency that the game is every day and every moment. And if you do that, then things take care of themselves. If you're waiting for the big home run, the grand slam, God, I need this one. I will say, obviously, praying for people. When I prayed for people, and this is not me, once again, it's always remembering it's God, but it's just amazing. And I'm sure you've had this experience, but gosh, when somebody's sick and they're in the hospital and you say prayers and you ask for their specific name, not just pray for them, what's their name?
Right.
See that and how often they've come through. And I don't know if that's, where that comes from. I just notice it's always come through, including, I think, what happened to me 12 days ago. I almost died on the operating table with a heart AFib operation. And Dr. Levin, good man, apparently gave me a paralytic called rocuronium. And my heart basically stopped, or my blood pressure was falling from 128/74 down to 50/50. And they had to give me epinephrine because I had an anaphylactic reaction. And I woke up just like, oh, man, what happened? And 2 hours later, I was beginning to feel better. And I was at the Chiefs game 2 days later, which is probably stupid, but I figured if I'm going to die, I'm going to die. I'd rather die at the Chiefs game.
Right.
But it also is that, where does our head go when things happen? And for me, it was absolutely, God still wants me here. I got more work to do. And
yes, you do.
And the work is, again, it's not about paved gold street. Come on, guys. It is about that depth of wisdom, not intelligence, wisdom, education, learning and intelligence, but it really should be, and sometimes is, if we're lucky, wisdom, being able to differentiate and distinguish between the lesser things and the truly important things. And of course, if there's some subtext in your life, I'm better than you, I've got so much wisdom that I'm going to give to you, then you're off the mark.
Right.
There's a movie now recently. I don't know why I'm so stream of consciousness today, but it said something I really love, which is, the idea is really, you're never better than anybody else. You're better than who you used to be.
Amen. I love that.
That's great.
I love what you're talking about too, about wisdom. And we always talk about low hanging fruit, and people always trying to go after that low hanging fruit versus being patient and waiting and seeing the fruits that God is going to give to you.
To me, the fruit that I've noticed, and we know about this, the fruits of the Spirit, is intuition, which is absolutely part of wisdom. When I'm writing my book, it's called Naked and Alone with 80,000 People, because that's how it feels like when you're running on the field. You're so isolated, kicker. But so much of it is, where do you put your head under great pressure? And getting to that place, it took me the last few years of my career to really get to that better place. If you can imagine the kicker, you're lining up, the ball's there, the ball represents our daily work and discipline and who we surround ourselves with. Most important thing we do in life, you choosing a great husband or a great wife, and in business as well, all those things, that's the holder. And then we have the people that are rushing at us. We got the people protecting us, our community, hopefully. And then you got 11 guys paid an average of almost $5 million a piece to block your kick and maybe eat you if they could.
Right.
and the goalposts are the bigger mission. So to me, that is your office as a human being. And everybody has their own office, which refines and defines what is their life's work, their mission. And if you take care of that, the wind, the referees, the screaming fans, the very large people in front of you doesn't matter. And so I would approach the ball on my last step. I would say to myself, left foot, because left foot for me with a right-footed kicker was point my left foot in the direction of that mission, that goalpost, and then explode. And explode to me was not about trying to kill it. It was just trust your God-given talent and your training and let it go. And the ball, the studies in the brain show that the self-conscious brain is very crude. The major muscle groups work, but when you let go of that self-consciousness, that God's in me and I know he's going to lead me to the right stuff, and you just attack it, the synapses in your brain work 100,000 times faster. And your natural speed, if you're a pitcher, the snap as you throw the ball, or a tennis player with your serve, or swinging the bat, all those things happen naturally. So intuition is a fruit of the spirit where we know who's really talking to us and we know who to trust. And we also notice people at a much deeper level. And I've got so many cases now working with the homeless. They know if I'm there for them or not. They know that I come from, and I tell all of our volunteers at Champions for the Homeless, the next one, September 21st, by the way, St. Vincent de Paul in downtown Phoenix. But I tell them there's absolutely no difference between the giver and the receiver.
Nope.
So
Amen.
you're better than somebody because you're given to them. You've lost the beautiful essence of the spiritual lesson that we're connected and there, but for the grace of God, go all of us. And when they notice that, people that have been in mercenary relationships on the street where somebody gives them something, they got to give them a ticket or they sign in here and but somebody's really just looking at them for who they are. No matter, and with no judgment, just love, just embracing them. Man, that's great. So if there's a stage that we can benefit as and take advantage of and exploit in a good way as athletes or so-called celebrities, it's simply for them to say, oh, this guy's a celebrity. He still thinks I'm important. I go, well, yes, that's why I'm here.
Right.
You are important. You're just as important as I am. And that's a kind of healing that you can't put in a notebook and measure digitally, but you just know if it's there or not. And you see the biblical word is scales, but these layers of humanity reappear, and the scales of dishumanity and pain and protection and scars of, the wounds of the past that melt away, at least for a few hours. And the word is hope, but it's really a much deeper thing than that. It's just, I'm still here for a reason. And people see that in me, and I still see that light that tells me there's something that I'm here for to be magnetized towards, even though right now I'm on the street.
Well, and what do you say to people? Because, you work with the homeless, and we've talked about how your post-football life really is exponentially more than all of your amazing accomplishments on the field with work that you do. What do you say to people? Because there's so much emotion wrapped up in people that just see homelessness, and they have, sometimes fear, or they have even anger towards people who are homeless. What do you say to them with the work that you're doing? How do you appeal to those people?
Where's your anger coming from, first of all, but also just look at California. And I always call out California because I want to bully them in a benign and spiritual way to say, get your act together with regard to your communities, because in LA, in San Francisco, all over the place, you've got a doubling and tripling of homelessness in the last 20 years, even though they spent $20 billion. And there's one simple distinction. You don't throw money at it. You throw this at it. You throw this at it, where you allow each of those people you say you're helping to acknowledge their uniqueness and their unique journey. If you don't, you're putting them in a big bucket, and they're just as much as if they're in a real prison, even if they're outside on the street, a prison of perception and judgment. And that never works. And so that's, to me, look at these people and look at their individual stories. I'll give you some statistics, just two. For every one person leaving homelessness now, two are entering. And while the stock market's doing incredibly well, that's for a small percentage of people. In the last 36 months, this is from St. Vincent de Paul itself, 7,000 evictions every month for 36 months. That's about 260,000 plus evictions times 4 people per eviction. That's over 1 million people in Maricopa in the Phoenix area, or
Wow.
one fifth of the population of Phoenix have been evicted, or temporarily at least homeless, in the last 3 years. So it is a real thing. And right now with the economy, what happens is lose a job, have a significant medical expense, and you're done.
Sure.
So the amount of people that have their unique journey, that are not mentally ill, that are not drug addicted, that's exponentially increasing. The amount of pediatric homelessness, elderly homelessness. And then, of course, what is mental illness? If somebody who is mentally ill suddenly feels like they're safe, suddenly feels like all those traumas that they've perceived or actually experienced are no longer the threat they were, it's amazing how transformation happens. Of course, Jesus manifested this in miracles, starting with Mary Magdalene, who I think had 7
Amen.
demons. So think about her. She became his greatest disciple in many ways. Of
Right.
course, in that culture, women weren't treated the same, but she was the one that went to the tomb. She was the one that the Spirit said, let them know he's risen. Right? So
Absolutely.
I get so emotional about this, because to me, when you hit on sort of like a vein of gold, we're sticking with that analogy of gold, the real gold, you're what you're supposed to be. So
Mhm.
powerful. And I don't apologize for it, because I know it's really from a place of strength to be able to admit it, but it empowers me to keep doing more. Yesterday, met with the University of Arizona, which are universities are often godless places these days too. But I had a wonderful conversation with a man named Cortez Smith, who's director at the Eller School of Business, about doing great work with diversity, with helping people that have had difficult transitions, not through DEI, so to speak, but through simply, once again, what's your journey? Where were your obstacles? Where are the places where you can grow? How can we help you get there? And that work is so powerful, whether it's working with kids with cerebral palsy, how I got my start. My aunt had cerebral palsy, Aunt Margaret. We raised $1 million for United Cerebral Palsy. But we educated people on the rights of the disabled, and then suddenly, light bulb, we're all disabled.
Right.
Getting
Yep.
back to that idea, God made us perfect, but perfect in our disability too. Perfect in the thorn in our side that
Mhm.
teaches us more than any of the good trophies we won. So, anyway, so I love this place to notice the gifts that make me able to help more people. And always, when we help other people, what does that do? It blesses us. It makes us feel like I'm where I need to be.
Oh,
Of
course it does.
absolutely. You feel
Right?
like you're bigger
Like
than
what you're doing
yourself.
right now, like what you guys are doing right now.
It's that
Canada,
ripple effect. I love that.
yeah. Robert F. Kennedy is a friend junior, and his father one of his famous quotes is, of course, how do we make a difference? Well, if we make that one little ripple effect, it grows. It grows into a benign spiritual tsunami. If we believe and if we just do our part, others will pick up on that vibration, or whatever you want to call it, that frequency. And that's what we're really doing. We're teaching a frequency of love and wisdom and gratitude.
Right. We express it first. We express that love. We show love. We live out our lives through the word. Then it becomes infectious. It really does.
Well, you just love on people. And I told Ken, and I said this in the podcast before, when God had put it on our heart to do the nonprofit, there were other people that might have known the Bible better. And there were other Christians that said, why her? I don't know why me. I just love people and I just want to give to them. And I might not, know every word perfectly, but I know in my heart, I love the Lord and I love giving, and I am super genuine. And I want to encourage people every single day, just like you do. And I never see someone that has, maybe a less expensive car, or they're on the road and think that they're any different than I am. They're just in a different station in their life, and they're just as beautiful in God's eyes as everyone else. And I never see them as less of a person ever.
And you really have to, you mentioned, the people who have a sickness again, and that they end up on the street because of that. We see that, not the homeless part of it, but we see people in our line of work with the law firm where an injury puts them out of work. And these people prior to their injury were just barely, paycheck to paycheck. And it sends their life into a downward spiral when they can't work because of an injury. And so, there but the grace of God go I for so many people. And it's important that we recognize that. And that's why the work that you're doing with Champions for the Homeless is so great. And if you want to take a couple of minutes and tell people how they can reach out to you and get involved in what you have coming up with that, we'd love to hear it.
Okay. Well, it's called Champions for the Homeless. And I've done it for 19 years. I would challenge anybody to think deeply and pray on what you would be willing to do for a generation, because that's when you take the intention to do something that's important and valuable, and you make it a reality for people that may never have had anything to depend on. But it's at St. Vincent de Paul. This next one on September 21st will be our 74th. And it's at 1075 Jackson. If you follow me on Facebook, and Instagram is Nick Lowery 88, and it's Nick the Kick, Nick Lowery on Facebook. I start putting things out there every week, starting next week, really, about it. But if you can bring $100 or more of gift certificates to McDonald's, that's great. But the most important thing is just join us there at 9:30 to organize all the clothing, thousands of pairs of underwear and socks and T-shirts, incredible music with CeCe Yan, the New Destiny Band, Ben Benulis and Siva Simran Khalsa, who are a chiropractor and acupuncturist, 5 haircutters, and just drowning people in love. It's the best thing ever. We do it on Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter, and twice in the summer. So this will be called Christmas in September. But join us, find me there, and you can also go to nicklowery.com to get more information. And these things are $300, and I think I know somebody who might have one. And it goes to purchasing more clothing for the homeless. So thank you for that. I've got to run for now. God bless you. I'd be honored to come on again. And for anybody thinking about doing something in the world, just think, what would be the thing that I would be so proud of I could stick with it for 20 years? Because then you end generational curses. And there's no greater thing to do than that. So thank you.
Well, thanks so much for being on today. We'd
love to have you back. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you. God bless you for what you're doing. We need great storytellers, and I guess we need cross-examiners too.
All right. Well, you have a blessed day. Thanks, Nick. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Well, as much as we love having our friends on here and laughing and having a good time and really examining our faith and their faith, we do want to remind you that we're real people. We own Gerber Injury Law. We are available and want to help you with any kind of an injury you, a friend, or family has. Please reach out to us at gerberinjurylaw.com.
And thank you for watching Cross-Examine with the Gerbers. We'll see you next time.
you.